everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to talk Fables, Volume 11. This is War and Pieces. Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're talking about Fables, Volume 11, War and Pieces. This is the halfway point of our Fables reread, or read-through, or whatever you want to call it. I've read this volume and the one after that, and then I stopped completely. So we are almost to the point where I'm going to be totally surprised. Even though it's been so many years since I read this, I really didn't remember much at all. So we'll just call it is what it is. After last volume, Volume 10, The Good Prince, which was so phenomenal, this one is kind of a letdown. I think in two ways. First, I think it's a letdown in terms of length. This is the big war that we've been building to ever since Volume 4, when the March of the Wooden Soldiers jumped in and started a battle. This is the battle with the great adversary, with Geppetto, with the Snow Queen, and a lot of it is really smart, really fun, and really ingenious. However, I think it suffers a little bit because Volume 10, The Good Prince, was such a long story and so involved and so magical and thought through and just had so many elements to it, and felt like a lot of pieces moving together in a way that you never even thought would happen, that when you get to this volume, which is the actual war, so to speak, it just feels like Volume 10 was really the war. That volume, the War and Pieces storyline is not as good as The Good Prince in terms of a read. There were things that they did in The Good Prince that I thought were a lot more imaginative than what they did here. And what they do here is, it feels like a lot more stuff that was never explained. There was no setup or anything like that. Like, all of a sudden, the Fables have a Zeppelin that flies via magic carpets pushing on the inside of the hull. This big ship that they have here, let me show it to you. This big Zeppelin here is made out of wood, and it flies because there's a bunch of magic carpets pushing on the inside, and it's headed by Prince Charming and Sinbad. That was never shown before or mentioned or anything like that, and it's like, all of a sudden, here's this Zeppelin. Good luck to you. So that is a real big bummer. There's some other things here that are set up, like the Beanstalk. What they do with Briar Rose, who is the Sleeping Beauty character from the Disney films kind of thing. That was set up before in I think Volume 2 or 3 with that storyline where they had to go rescue her in the city. That is really cool to see a callback to that. But this whole Magic Zeppelin thing really is a big letdown. And I was like, man, I wish we'd seen a little bit of that before, or like a hint of it or something, just to give us a clue about what their actual plan was. And also, unfortunately, this is called War and Pieces, and you think this is going to be the war. And since King Ambrose took out a lot of the armies in the last volume, there's not that many to fight left. So there's not really a huge battle sequence or a big army to go defeat, because most of them have been dispatched in the last volume. Even all of the people in the capital are dispatched here with Briar Rose's magic. So you're kind of left with a final skirmish as opposed to a final battle. And then what they're doing with Geppetto at the end here is just kind of, it's done. It's not really explained. It's not really explained why or how it was all set up. I believe that's coming in the next volume, but it's a nice twist, but it's not set up and it's not paid off. It's more like, here's another thing that's happening. And I know Fable sometimes has the tendency to do that, but a lot of the time the charm works for it as opposed to against it. And I think that's where some of these, here's another thing that's happening that you never thought of before, works against Fables, the story, as opposed to working for it. I feel like you should be getting payoff after payoff after payoff. And instead of that, we have things that are just like happenstance. There's two big payoffs with the Beanstalk, and even then that's not really used as more of a defense of it. It was more used in the volume where Bigby attacked the homelands and made that threat to the Emperor and burned down the Sacred Grove. The only real payoff here is the Briar Rose thing, which you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this power entirely. But the whole thing with the Zeppelin just feels like it's just a magic MacGuffin and never once is it mentioned before, and it's never mentioned after, since it's kind of distracted here. What I will say about the Fables series up until this point is they have done a fantastic job of building up these secondary characters of Prince Charming, Beauty, and Beast into real characters, and you really feel Prince Charming's leadership here and in the last volume, The Good Prince, where I thought it was really, really cool to see him kind of take charge. Really, the stars of this book are Prince Charming and Sinbad and their adventures, and their camaraderie is really cool to witness. Even though most of the volume kind of does fall flat, it doesn't really feel like the big climax that it is. Like, for whatever reason, I feel like maybe the length also of The Good Prince of last volume, 8 parts, and this is really like 3 or 4 issues here, this battle, this final war. It just falls flat in comparison to that. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying The Good Prince was way better, way more engrossing than reading this volume. Another cool storyline in here in the beginning is the Cinderella 2-parter where she goes and rescues Pinocchio in Argentina. That is cool, and the building of this character here is kind of the setup of what they're going to do with Geppetto at the end of the volume. So this collects issues 70 through 75, so about 6 issues here, and I gotta say, they're fun. It just feels like the climax is a letdown, although, you know, considering we're only halfway through the entire storyline, maybe this isn't really meant to be the true climax of the series, although at the time, at least when I was reading it, it felt like it should be, because I don't think I knew it was going on afterwards. At the time, I just didn't realize how far it was going to go. So everything you've read before, this feels like it should be the climax to the story, even though it's probably only the midway point. So there you have it. Anyway, those are my rambling thoughts on Fables Volume 11, War and Pieces. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of this book, and we will see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.